Okay, great. I apologize for a late start. Tough commute from Boston. This is a meeting of the Bolton Board of Selectmen. We're in Davis Hall. Thanks to the First Parish Church, because after we selected this day, it was a little tough to find a venue that could hold the anticipated crowd. We've allocated an hour and a half to discuss this issue regarding 117 and the Department of Transportation. And I thought that we would start, though. At the beginning of our last meeting, we had a handout, but Harold Brown wasn't there. And I thought it would make sense here at the beginning to have him go through sort of the potential benefits to the town of this proposal. I think then Barry Lorian has an update on what he had given us at the last meeting, and then we'll open this up to questions from Mr. Lorian and comments. So hopefully we'll have enough time. So the summary that had been put together by the Department of Public Works was fairly detailed. And Harold, you want to sort of just give us a summary?
You're doing a good job. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's go with the mic.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that. Because of this venue and because of the way the meeting's being recorded, we're going to ask people to go to the microphone to make sure that we pick up all comments.
All right, this is the summary that I did for our illustrious president, Mr. Will. The following information on 117 from Lancaster Town Line 495 is a project cost associated with a stretch of road to the town of Bolton. As you know, I recommend the town turn over the cost of the repair and maintain 3.5 miles of Main Street. The benefits of turning over the maintenance will contain our DPW costs, deflect wear and tear, to cut through road we have. The history, 117 is 63 years old. The last rebuild of the road was completed in 1952. During my 22 years tenure, the road has had several sections patched and has been resurfaced twice. In this time, only 2 drainage structures have been fully rebuilt, with several other structures receiving minimal patches. Drainage. There are 56 drainage structures in the stretch of road which will need to be rebuilt in the future. As I mentioned, only 2 have been rebuilt. In the 10 years, these structures will be more than 70 years old, and the integrity will be compromised at this point. I estimate the total rebuild of these structures is approximately $240,000 to $260,000 at today's prices. I have no way of knowing the current conditions of the piping from the road to the head walls. The only way to inspection the only way to inspect these is to hire an infrared camera crew to come in and inspect. There are 2 structures which concern me. There is a structure that runs between Green Road and Sampson under 117. This cement culvert and some minor repairs have been done over the 20 years. There are also 2 old stone culverts in front of the Hope Mill that runs under the road. Again, I have no way of knowing the condition of these structures, and the repair and replacement of these will be very expensive when the time comes. Resurfacing, would cost us $780,000 to $795,000 for all planned pots up this stretch with 3 inches of total spots at today's prices. This will need to be done in approximately 2 years, and I assume that the prices will increase more during this time period. Snow removal. The town of Rolling will spend $35,000 a year on snow removal. May I add this year here, I think that's pretty good. Well, this section 117, this includes labor, materials, If maintenance returned over to the state, we could avoid this effort annually. Sidewalks, I estimate this is to repair our sidewalks, not to do anything else. $88,000 and $94,000 in order to repair our current sidewalks and create grants at the intersections which are ADA acceptable. This does not include widening the sidewalks to meet any ADA compliance. This expense does not include the cost of the new sidewalks. If we were to, there was two different factions or committees that have recommended work be done on 117, including shared shoulders, sidewalks, intersection repair, and so on. The engineering, the two separate committees have requested changes to 117 in the center. Engineering will be required for this project, and the cost would be, I estimate, approximately $700,000, depending on the extent of the changes. Traffic signals, all the hardware at 110 intersection needs to be upgraded. This expense is estimated at $250,000. This is hardware only. We're not touching the road. Pond Park. The railing on Pond Park almost completely rusted through. This has been identified. The hazard and the cost to replace this, we estimate is $70,000 to $70,000. Resident safety, in addition to the above items, there is a significant cost associated with vehicle and traffic and pedestrian safety in this stretch of road. To improve safety as described in the most recent mobility report, this report gave a list of recommended improvements to the road. The cost of these improvements will depend on which projects are chosen to move forward. In summary, if the Commonwealth agrees to accept this stretch of road, it would be significant saving to the town of Bolton. Taking the pavement surface, traffic signals, equipment, drainage structures, sidewalks, and snow removal in account, the total amount is $1,464,000 to $1,504,000 over a 10-year period. If we were subtract the drainage figures, which are the one-time expense during this 10-year period, the yearly cost to the town during the 10 years is $88,600 to $90,000 a year. That's what it'll cost you. And the way I devised that is you took your what it's costing us to do the snow plowing, and then what it cost us over within that 10-year period when it comes time to resurface.
The board have any questions?
Yes, actually, I do. Just so folks know, Harold, you and I talked about this memo, and the paragraph after the drainage, which you mentioned the two structures that are most significant to you. One, the cost that you mentioned, the 1.46 to 1.5, does not include the cost for repair of these two structures, because you have no idea.
No, I have absolutely no idea.
Folks should know that this past summer, we repaired and replaced a culvert on Sampson Road, very close to 117. That road was closed off for some period of time during the summer. And in my discussion with Harold, originally we had budgeted $250,000 for that repair, and actually came in at about $200,000. And Greg Harold, correct me if I'm wrong in our discussion, that the significance of these two particular structures in terms of repair probably are at least in the same order of magnitude as the repair on Sampson Road this summer. So if you factor in that one was $200,000, and you make an assumption that each of the two here are $200,000 apiece, which would not be out of the ordinary. It could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. We'd actually need to add another $400,000 to that 1.46 to 1.5 million. So it's actually approaching closer to $2 million in terms of actual cost over the next 10 years. So I just wanted to make sure that folks know that.
I probably we're being conservative there because we must deal with traffic. And once we start dealing with that, that pushes the price almost, that's why it's most of it's all cost plus.
Right. Thank you. That's the only question.
Mr. Lawrence, you had some additional remarks?
I don't have a presentation, but I did have a couple of answers to some questions that were asked at the last meeting that I couldn't answer, and one or two points that I wanted to make based off of this discussion we had last month. I guess the first point was we heard a lot about 4 lanes. You know, is the state planning on coming in and making the section of road 4 lanes? And I cannot stress enough that we are not. We wouldn't do it tomorrow, we wouldn't do it next week, next year, within 10 years, within 20 years. We just don't see it ever as a 4-lane roadway. I was asked, well, can you guarantee it? That we can't do. We can't guarantee. The town couldn't guarantee it. However, given the nature of the roadway and the traffic that it carries and where it lies in proximity to other roadways, we really never see it going 4 lanes, and it would not be it wouldn't be something that we pushed for. We've been pushing for 4-lane sections on other roads in other towns for 10 or 15 years, and really haven't gotten anywhere simply because of the cost. So there are a lot of issues that would preclude us from ever making this a 4-lane roadway. So I just wanted to put that on the table. 4 lanes, no way. We're not going there. We're not proposing it. I was asked if the state would be interested in taking over the roadway if there was a town gap provided. So basically, in the center of town, if that was left under local control for some distance, and the discussions there were all that it's essentially a small enough section of state highway, or it would be, that we wouldn't be interested in further breaking it up. Logistically, it becomes a little bit difficult just to identify problems, especially for emergency response and so forth. So we're pretty persistent in that we would be looking for a state highway from 190 to 495. The on-street parking issue came up a few times, and I was asked if we were able to waive that in certain sections, and if it had been waived in other sections in the state. I spoke directly with the state traffic engineer in his office on that, and to their knowledge, there is no exception anywhere in the state, and he would be not willing to make an exception. So on the parking prohibition on state highway, that would have to remain in place. However, MassDOT's general practice is that we really don't enforce that unless it's a safety issue. So, and I think I mentioned last time that in 20 years I can never recall enforcing that. We put up a sign here or there, no parking on state highway, when people were parking in a travel lane. But otherwise, it's kind of an issue where, as long as it's not harming anyone, we kind of look the other way. There was an issue, or a question rather, about historic district, and how would the idea that there's a historic district in town, how would that affect any decisions that we make? And when I spoke with our cultural resources people on that, ultimately, the historic elements in a historic district, which could be anything from buildings to stone walls to hitching posts to things of that nature along the roadway, those become pretty hard constraints. So when there's a historic district, we end up working closely with the local historic commission and modifying our design around those elements that are important to the community. I think that was it for questions that I couldn't respond to at the time. That's me, but otherwise I'm here to answer more questions.
Great.
Oh, could I also mention, and this is a little bit difficult now that I understand the format, but we had promised the town that we would put together a concept of 117 at Wattaquatic and the new common. So hot off the presses today, we have a conceptual drawing that shows what the intersection would look like if we were to provide left turn lanes, a left turn lane onto Wattaquatic and a corresponding left turn lane into the new common area with a traffic signal, with sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks and pedestrian crossings. So that drawing is here for everyone to look at, and I can explain it in detail later afterwards. I guess typically when we have public meetings, design public meetings, immediately following the meeting is when we talk to people about some of these drawings, and I don't know if you've got other agenda items after this or not.
We do. In fact, we have a continued public hearing.
Okay. So I don't know if you'd like to spend any time looking at that drawing, or if I could just leave it here, and if there are questions, I'll give them my business card, they can call me. Or I can move it into the hallway, into a different room.
Yeah, I mean, could you just maybe give us a brief overview now?
Sure.
And because I think folks may have questions as the course of this, but it might be helpful. And maybe you could even go up to that microphone.
Sure.
Yeah.
It may be a little hard to see, but what we've provided here is the blue are traffic signal heads. If you can make this out, these are left turn pockets, one to turn into Wattaquatic. There's another one to turn into the new common parking area. What we've done is hold the south side of the roadway, so the curb line stays where it is today. Any of the widening would be to the north side of the roadway. We provided a minimum cross-section here. We provided a 5-foot shoulder on the south side, an 11-foot travel lane eastbound, and 11-foot turn lanes on each side, an 11-foot travel lane westbound, and a 2-foot shoulder on the north side. Now, we had to provide a 5-foot shoulder on the south side. And I know that increases the cross-section, but we have buildings, as everyone knows, very close to the intersection. If we don't have a sufficiently wide shoulder, this vehicle exiting Wattaquatic cannot turn into the lane if there are vehicles queued up in this left turn lane. So we've got to provide some shoulder. It allows for that turning movement. We're not accommodating a tractor trailer here. We're accommodating a box truck, a typical FedEx truck or UPS truck, and that's it. The tractor trailer was to come to the intersection. Everyone would have to move out of the way, probably like they do now. But that may help keep tractor trailers out of the intersection if they know it's going to be difficult to navigate through. On the opposite side, we assumed we'd grant ourselves waivers and get down to a 2-foot shoulder. The turning movements aren't an issue because we've got room too. If you can see, these are sweeping curves that come into and out of the common driveway. So we don't need as wide of a shoulder because we've got these radius curves here. So we think we've provided a minimum cross-section that will function well, provide sidewalk on both sides of the roadway, provide exclusive pedestrian phases in crosswalks to cross the roadway, provide an area for left turners to sit and wait safely until they have their green indication. The impact is really all to the north side, but because we've really shrunken the shoulders, I forget the house number here, but 711 and 713. The widening in front of that property is about 2 feet. So the back of the sidewalk would move about 2 feet closer to the house. That's the best we could do. I think any more, and you're going to start to introduce safety concerns into the design. So there is some impact there, but it isn't as much, I think, as we initially thought it would be once we put it on paper and really thought about where we need the space.
Perfect. Thank you. I think at this point we're going to open it up to sort of questions and comments, and we'd ask folks to go up to the microphone so it can be recorded through Bolton Access TV. And I also want to note I mean, for folks who may not have been at the first meeting or unsure procedurally what's going on here, any decision as far as the transfer of the roadway of 117 to the state can only be made by town meeting. And so the decision, to the extent we've got a decision up here, would be just to whether or not to put that article on the town meeting warrant to determine whether the town can make that determination or not. So,
Bernard, 1021 Main Street. I'd like to thank Mr. Brown for taking care of some of the worst 10 days of weather we've had for years. But I'm going to take a slightly different tack than has been talked about before. The fiscal part of this. To go through Mr. Brown's numbers, he's talking $90,000 a year for ongoing maintenance to the road once it's been, once all the culverts are taken care of and the sidewalks are done and so on and so forth. And that turns out to be, according to my rough calculations, 1,700 houses, $52 a year per house, which for me is not even 0.5% of what I pay. Maybe it's worth that to potentially destroy the character of the town of Bolton, maybe not. So the 35,000, if we eliminate that part of the budget because we don't have to clear the snow for that 3 miles, we also lose $14,000 or so from state funds. So that's another, so our net gain for that transaction is about $12 a year per household. Again, not too much money if you ask me for a $10,000 tax bill per year. So this year is saying that pretty much guaranteed we're going to be seeing a lighted water product. I actually don't think that's a bad idea. But if there's any questions, you got it right there. Let's see. As far as the culverts and things, you're talking, $1 million, $1.5 million for various projects. It's according to Mr. Brown, it's less than that, but let's assume it's $1.5 million, which is a pretty decent pile of dough. But it has to be done every 70 years. So we shouldn't be budgeting this for like the next 3 years or saying, oh, the sky is falling for the next 10 years. This kind of activity should have been planned for at least 20 years ago, 30 years ago. When I buy something big that's going to expire, I immediately start budgeting for the next time I have to buy that same thing. We should have been doing that, certainly not the first year, obviously, but, we've known about these things getting worse every year. So I actually propose we should increase our DPW budget in general, so this kind of thing doesn't jump up and bite us. It's certainly not a reason to be turning over the poor budgeting, or mediocre budgeting, isn't a reason to be turning over control over such a major change to the state, which I trust Mr. Lorian's statement so far, but, you might, things might change. Let's see, that's about that. Just $1.5 million over 70 years. Again, it's about $12 a year per household. Not too much, if you ask me. Not really worth selling the farm over. Anyway, that's it.
thank you.
If I may make a comment. In years past, in particular, this particular selectman has advocated that the town set up savings accounts, or we had opportunities to join the Community Preservation Act, which required us to match certain state funds. And every single time, they have been voted down by the townspeople. So while your suggestion is noble, the town, time after time, has rejected the notion of setting up a savings account to sock away money for something in the future. But your suggestions well taken, but the townspeople haven't spoken.
My name is Jim Drewitz. I own the property right here at 711 and 713 Main Street. And although I have the same concerns about our town can financially not afford to maintain the main road in that town, my main concern is with the antiquity of the town and the character of the town. That's why we bought the property here. It's what we like about the town. It's what I think a lot of people like about this town. I think that a lot of this is gonna change that. I know that the striping will be different, that there's clearly now 7 or 8 lights gonna be hanging at that intersection. So those are some of the concerns. When I bought this property, we looked at permitting to do the work that we wanted to do there, and it was years of different committees in this town that couldn't seem to figure out if they would allow us to do it or if they wouldn't because of the antiquity of the town, and they were afraid that maybe, we're going to do something that's not fitting with the town. Well, now it seems that finances are causing the downfall of the antiquity of this town, or the potential downfall of the antiquity and the character that this town has. And to me, if it's strictly financial, it just baffles me how that something like that could happen, where a town can't pay a certain amount of money to maintain its own roads. I realize it's a big road, I realize it's a lot of money, but I agree with this gentleman that this is something that should have been planned ahead. Beyond that, I have major concerns with, obviously the encroachment on my property. I have a well right at the front corner of my property. I know the state tends to use more salt than towns do when they maintain a road. How is that going to affect my well? There's also, a brook running under my barn, which is going to be, have a road, a couple of feet closer to it now. I don't know how the EPA feels about that, but I know when I was looking to do anything there, they were very concerned. So I can't imagine that wouldn't be an issue for them as well. So these are all, things that I think a lot of people have concerns about. And I understand that this is a small part of the town, and that, it only maybe negatively affects a few people here in the middle, and maybe, some of the others, along here. But I think it affects us all with what the town becomes. And I think it's potentially going to become something different than what it was when I bought it and what I had hoped to kind of contribute. And now, there's going to be a common that, we've been waiting years for this to happen. And, now right in front of my property, which I've invested a lot of money in, you're talking 8 lights. It's a ridiculous amount of paint on the ground. And, I'm just not happy about any of it. I think it's ugly. And, I think it's a poor decision. I think maintain your roads.
Let me ask you, sir, are you happy with the current traffic situation in front of your property now?
I think it could be better, but I don't think this will help it that much. I don't think this is, I'm not, I think it's safer. I think that, if you put this lane here, you're going to have people zooming by at 35 miles an hour with cars stopped here. And, potentially it's a lot more dangerous. And I think that was another concern early on. Was we had talked about the parking that was going to be allowed on street, and it was allowed on street, and now that's going to be taken away. And that was talked about as a traffic quelling technique. Without me even knowing it, they painted a curb down right in front of my building so that, that ended the parking there. There was parking there, and all of a sudden, then there wasn't. I don't know if there was a meeting about it or what, but I wasn't notified. That was one of the things when I bought this, when we proposed this project to the town. One of the talks was about allowing people to park. We have limited parking there. There's potentially 5 spaces in that property. So that's an issue for me as well. So that's my take on it.
Any other?
We're in public space. I am Carrie at Amazon Manor and 117, and
Please speak into the microphone.
how's that?
That's better.
Okay. I am one of the many opposed to the widening of the road and making it a highway. I did propose, however, to some view that some consolation prize that town water and sewer would be part of this if this ever occurred, but that sounds unlikely. Maintaining Bolton's rural character is wonderful, but there's no work here. So it's a commuter area and it's a wonderful spot to be, and hence the traffic. So I guess that's how I'm looking at it. How about we bring in public transportation? How about a bus schedule and or taxis that run to the commuter train and or directly to the outlying towns or to Boston, and make it available to people right here. We have plans for a town common coming, which is all wonderful, but it's more open space, and do we need more open space? And I am all for that. That's one of the reasons I live here in this rural area as well. But how about we consider that is under development, that common, but not yet under construction? Could that be part of a parking area, tastefully done, protecting neighbors that abut it, and still provide revenue and a spot for transit to come in and access and address the traffic problem as well? In the most remote villages and places like Ireland, where sheep crowd the roads, public transportation is accessible, utilized, and affordable, and it doesn't change their very tiny access roads. Can we consider that? Can we do this here in Bolton? Can we bring people together with public transportation, increase property values, barely change it, and limit, not open this as a highway and limit the traffic as well?
Great. Joe, can you get there first?
I'm Joe Myerson. I live at 749 Main Street, which is just beyond what's shown in that illustration. But my concern is based on a couple of things that Mr. Lorian, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, that the gentleman from the state said. Well, first of all, I want to commend Don Lowe for investigating this and looking for ways to try to keep the town's expenses down. However, there are times when if you have a town, it has to look out for the interests of its residents. Now, Mr. Lorian had said before at the last meeting that their primary interest is moving traffic. Well, I'm sorry, but that traffic comes from New Hampshire. It includes the milk tankers from Vermont. It includes commuters from Lord knows where. They don't stop in Bolton. They don't care about Bolton. All they do is go through. And those of us who live here would like to keep the center of town the way it is. I have a 200-year-old maple, which I know because I talked to the tree warden recently about it, is half of it is straddled by the state right-of-way. And that tree was frankly one of the reasons that my wife and I bought our house 30 years ago. It doesn't seem to me that the Bolton's interest is in helping the commuters from New Hampshire or even from Leominster come more quickly and easily through town. And the other thing that Mr. Laurie and I asked him at the last meeting, I mentioned that I think the principal cause of the backups during morning rush hour especially, is the school traffic at Mechanic Street. And he acknowledged that that was a major factor. I asked him if there was anything that a state takeover could do to change that, and he said no. So you're still going to get those backups in the morning that drive all of us crazy. And I don't think we want to lose the character of Main Street for that. So I urge the selectmen not to submit this article to the warrant. Thank you.
Joe, let me ask you, because you've been on the road for 30 years. We've got vehicle counts, it's 23,000 cars a day or something on that order. Currently, is that, how much of an increase? Is that a factor of 4 or 5 or 10 over what it was when you moved in?
I haven't been counting except occasionally. I might say you could count the gray hairs on my head, but you can see the color that they are. It's gone up. It's gone up drastically. I think it's gone up by, this is just off the top of my head, 4 or 5. But you know, there was a lot of research done only in the last 4 or 5 years, and I can't cite it, but I have read the articles, that the more highway you build, the more traffic you get. And I would say, if we make it difficult enough for those truckers, they'll go on Route 2 like they should. And if you look on your GPS, when you're traveling, there's usually, it will tell you that going 117 is shorter, but it is never faster. So, again, there are alternatives for the commercial traffic. There are even alternatives for the commuters. So I rest my case.
Yeah, well, no, I think you're right, except when you see these people sitting like morning after morning, whoever's coming from Leominster, morning after morning, they're sitting there on 117, you know, I don't know that it's, you know, I'm not sure what the answer is, but it doesn't seem as though there's a core group of people that aren't going to be dissuaded from coming on 117.
Well, that's right. I'm not saying we should block off the road, but they should know that if they go 117, it's going to take them a while. And, I mean, the other thing we could do, and I don't know how we could do it, the biggest problem is the traffic turning into our schools. And Mr. Lorien said that there's nothing that the state plan could do to change that, and I'm certainly not proposing moving the school. You know, we make sacrifices because we have local schools, and I think we have a local community, and it's the function of local government to help that local community.
All right, thank you.
Can I just make one remark?
Sure.
To that? I just wanted to point out that the improvements that we've proposed aren't to move more vehicles through your community.
No, it's moving expeditiously, right?
It's actually, all of the improvements that we've proposed are multimodal improvements related to pedestrian and bicycle safety in terms of wider shoulders, more sidewalk and crosswalks and pedestrian crossings. About the only vehicle capacity improvement we've proposed is this intersection improvement here, and really how much more traffic it moves through is questionable at this time, but we know they will move through more orderly with a traffic signal. So I tried to be very clear at the last meeting that we're not trying to move more traffic through. We're trying to address all modes of transportation and move traffic through safely. Here.
Kia Oceanline 702 Main. I actually have a question for the chief, for Harold, Mr. Lorien, and the selectmen, but you want me to break it up, I will. The easiest question is for the chief. I'm one of the people who's very concerned about losing a parking lane. If we lose our parking lane, I have to fit another car on my front yard. Or, as Mr. Lorien suggests, would the chief ticket me if I parked right there at the beginning of the turn lane?
Well, I can answer that. That's a decision that I can't make tonight because I haven't seen the final plans. I don't have the information. I don't know what the safety issues and the safety concerns are. So at a later time, I can certainly answer that question, but not tonight.
Okay, that's good enough. Although I think most people would probably say that those of us who are that close to the turning lane would not be allowed to park at any time. My question for Harold is, east of 495, the road was completely rebuilt, I don't know, a decade ago or something? And it was my understanding that the state paid for that entirely?
That's correct.
And so the state did not own the road when they paid for that. Why is this section of road different now?
Maybe the town administrator can speak to that.
I think I can answer. I'm not turning my back on you, I'm just speaking into
Yeah.
I actually did some research on that because I had the very same question, so it's a completely logical question. And apparently, and I wasn't here at the time, but apparently there were a lot, that there was some significant safety issues back then, that there was a stretch of time where I think in the neighborhood of about 24 vehicles that we know of were getting blown tires because of the condition of the road in that area. And our state representative helped raise the issue that we, and the town, the people who were in government in the town at the time helped raise the issue, that it was just an extraordinary safety concern at that time for safe motor vehicle traffic. And because of the extraordinary situation, the state did agree ultimately to fund that project. I believe the town paid for the engineering of it, and the state paid for the project because of the uniqueness of that particular situation.
Okay. So it's possible that that could happen again, that they could deem a collapsed culvert as a significant hazard, and that they, if we petition them to help us do that, that they might come through on a specific project. Without giving up the whole road, we could deal with one issue, either a culvert or one traffic light at 110 and 117.
I can't speak for the state. I would say that if we had an emergency situation, that resources become available to you during an emergency that don't normally become available to you. As the chief executive officer of the town, I try to deal with issues before they become emergencies, which is one of the benefits of acting proactively, which is what some of the earlier speakers have spoken. We don't want to let the road get into the condition, or the infrastructure get into the condition where we are dealing with collapses. We'd much rather see us do repairs.
So my question for Mr. Lorian is, if Harold mentioned all of these culverts and such, those were never mentioned in your report. There were many things that we mentioned at the last meeting that also weren't mentioned in your report, although we talked about them. Is it possible that you could redo the report and get some more language, maybe not a guarantee, but closer to a guarantee that we would get some of the things that we are interested in? I also think it's sort of odd that Harold used all these numbers based on 10 years when the report uses 20 years, which would make Craig's numbers even more insignificant. So it sort of scares me when so much time and energy has been put into talking about a light at Wattaquatic, and there's no mention of a light at Manor Harbor, which is a far more important intersection for regulating traffic for us locals. And it seems to me, if you're going to put a light at Wattaquatic, it's going to actually force more traffic through that intersection. All the people who normally wait at Harvard and Manor to get across are going to start using Wattaquatic. And I mean, I can visualize two lights working in combination, but I think that's one of the things that should be mentioned in the report, and a lot more study, even this much detail should be done for Manor Harbor. And as for Mechanic Street, which also...
I'm sorry, can I just follow up on that point, Gail? Would you, I mean, one alternative we would have, or possibly in addition to this, option at town meeting, would be to see if town meeting in the alternative wanted to vote for, pay for an engineering study to consider lights at Wattaquatic and/or Manor Road. I mean, is that something you, as someone who lives here, would you be in favor of that?
I would totally be in favor of that, because I think that is doable, and I think we could get tip money to do it, and I don't think you have to turn over control of the whole road just to get an important improvement that the town can control and agree on. And even though I think that would require a lot of debate and hearing, yes, I think that would be much more satisfactory.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted. You had a final thought? Because we do have a line, but we still have plenty of time.
Right, the final thought is, I just wanted to correct your impression that you're accusing us of spreading rumors about it becoming a 4-lane highway. We're actually worried that it's just going to be a 3-lane highway, because I think long-term, you're gonna end up having if you put a turning lane here, there's gonna be a turning lane probably at Manor Harbor. There's probably gonna be a turning lane at Mechanic. There could even be a turning lane down near the salt box. Eventually, you're looking at a town that is gonna have no parking. It won't be wider, but there will be 3 travel lanes, most all the way through the historic district. The traffic will be forced to be closer to our houses, which rattles our windows, and it will devalue our properties, and probably all the properties all the way to 110. And I think the selectmen need to do some more financial research about lowering assessed values and how that also would impact versus the savings of $12 a year or whatever. Thanks.
Okay, I apologize, I didn't mean to offend you, and I wasn't, I certainly didn't mean to imply that everybody thought that the department was proposing a 4-lane section. I just wanted to go on record to make sure that I was clear, in case I was unclear at the last meeting. And as far as a 3-lane section, I guess I agree with you that I would envision an occasional left turn pocket where necessary to take turning traffic out of the through traffic. But that would be probably in just some of those locations where there are a lot of turns. But I wouldn't envision that occurring for the entire length of the corridor, maybe 2 or 3 locations. We did review all the studies that were available at the time, and we considered a traffic signal at Manor and Harvard. And when I say considered, we were looking at 8 miles of roadway. So we weren't doing a detailed study at every intersection, at every section of the roadway. We were kind of doing a first review. I almost want to call it a cursory review. And any improvement that we would propose would involve a lot of public feedback and looking at a lot of other alternatives and a lot of vetting with the community. So, because we didn't look at a certain culvert or a certain location for an intersection, that doesn't mean that if the roadway were to be turned over to the state, that we would ignore those. We work closely with Harold and the town, identify those locations, and replace those culverts or address the intersection as fit, which we saw fit working with the community.
Don, you have something to add?
I do, just to follow up, Mr. Lorian made the comment about a 4-lane highway, not a 4-lane highway, a 4-lane road, not because anybody said it or even inferred it at the previous meeting that the selectmen had, but I did inform him that I have literally had 2 people who live on Main Street come into my office and say that if this happens, they are convinced that 117 will become a 4-lane highway, and that every structure on the road would be moved back 20 feet from where they currently exist, because the state would need to do this for the entire length of the road. And I tried to convince them that logistically that just and physically couldn't happen because of wetlands and cost and many different issues. But I did let him know that there is that concern out there. Certainly did not come from the last meeting, but I think, as people know, I do have an open door policy, and I'm very happy that people take advantage of it to come in and talk to me without an appointment. And I did have 2 such people come in and express that concern, so that's where that came from.
Mr. Perry.
I want to say briefly that I totally agree with the idea that we can afford to support, maintain, and support our own roads for something like the cost of 1 trip to Starbucks, possibly 2 trips to Starbucks. However, I mostly want to correct the common misconception. It's true that Bolton doesn't have CPA, and so donates a portion of CPA money to other towns or the Commonwealth. But it's not reasonable to use that as a measure of the sentiment of the town, because the fact is that the CPA was never defeated by town meeting. It came up, I can explain that briefly. The first time it came up only 2 times. The first time it came up, Gary Brackett had been in court until that morning came in with a list of maybe 40 changes to the bylaw, began reading them off, and some person got up and reasonably suggested that it be postponed till the next year, but it didn't really come up yet. It was not defeated at that meeting, it was just postponed. It passed at a subsequent meeting, it passed really by a wide margin. It was defeated the following week at the balloting, which is also required, because nobody bothered to show up. It's a small handful of people. So there was no sentiment of the people against the CPA, and in fact, it would be a good idea to bring it back up again someday.
Hi, I'm talking in public too. Nanachka Rogers, Randall Road. I just wanted to express a different opinion. I'm 100% for this. I'm probably one of the few people here that are for it, but every single person I've spoken to about this is for it. So I just don't want you to feel that everybody in this town is against it, because we're not. So this is a small group of people, but there are 2,000 houses in Bolton. So I just want to make sure that this comes to town meeting, so everybody gets a say. It shouldn't be decided here tonight just because some people came, some people didn't come. I feel like everybody should have a chance to vote on this at town meeting. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, Leslie Breeze, Pinewood Road. The DOT has done a great job of describing what they're going to do to move traffic through the town. However, they're moving it through the center of our town, our historic center. It ends up splitting the town north and south. There's no way to cross now, and you're just going to make things even worse. If you're trying to look at traffic issues, my suggestion is, number one, look at better options for people who live in Clinton to get to 495, because they're coming up north to us to get onto 495. Better to find a better option for them. In terms of Lancaster, you're not working on a road that goes through the center of your town. The school, the library, the town hall, the churches, you're dividing the whole thing. I understand traffic needs to move, but we're a town and you're a transportation system, and they're totally separate issues. And somehow, right here, they don't work the way they're being described. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jörg Odens. We moved 2 years ago to Bolton, so I'm very happy to be here. And one of the first things actually I've seen here when we looked at the house was the roof on myself. We really liked the center. It was kind of, not kind of quiet road, even though there was traffic, but it was still having a lot of charm, historical aspects. And I may not be aware of many aspects that are behind that, but one reflection I have is, I think basically what we're talking about here is control, right? That's the key point. So, do we keep control on what is happening to 117, or do we give it away? And maybe in 5 or 10 years, no one is going to remember this meeting here, and other things may happen. And I mean, for me, it's just, if a town is such a wonderful center, and maybe has plans with it, that may also be having different interests than, for example, Mayor Scott, who is of course having the aspects like, I want to provide safe, but is also optimizing commuter terms into Boston, things like that. So they may be providing interests, and from that perspective, I think we should have control on that. And to me, the financials are important, but if it was my own money, I would give it for that. Because I think having control within the future gives you opportunities to react to certain things. So if you want to increase, for example, the businesses, I would like to have more business here. I think you have bakery or things like that. So then you have the possibility to actually do that. And you don't have to ask other people to do that. And quite frankly, the safety things that I've seen, it wouldn't be things that we couldn't do on our own. doesn't look to me like, this is beyond the budget to do those improvements.
Let me just, you sort of raised tangentially the zoning issue, and I want to make it clear, the town controls zoning along 117. It currently does, and it will in the future. And as a result, I mean, there was a suggestion, I think at the last meeting, that this could turn into Route 20, and it couldn't, because the current zoning doesn't permit that. There are some people who want more businesses in town. Many people don't want more businesses in town. So, but that's sort of a separate issue from the control of the roadway. But I understand your point.
This is an example, but obviously the parking situation, the traffic situation may impact those things. So if we want this a quiet town, and I'm talking maybe 10, 20 years from now, maybe at one point we may consider having a road that would be circumventing Boston or something.
That actually was an idea maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
They do that all the time in Europe where I come from, and it's actually increasing the town. But of course now we don't have the possibilities. The only thing I'm saying is, if you maintain control, you can actually later react to certain things. If you give it away, it's given away. And I really trust you for the moment, but maybe in 3 years it will work somewhere else. The next guy is going to think differently. So I think that's the difference. Right?
Thank you.
Hi, Terry Abdalian, Bond Hill Road. So I also support the change to having the roadway managed by Mass DOT. And for maybe slightly different reasons, I don't live in the center of town, and I know that's what brings most of you here. And I don't necessarily say I represent everybody that doesn't live in the center of town, but I also hear very positive things about benefits. I see improved safety rather than less safety. If you're going to have more crosswalks, the bicycle lanes, and what's very important to me, which may not come to a surprise to anybody, is looking for safe, ADA compliant sidewalks. Now I know all of that is not going to happen tomorrow, but I can be probably more certain it would be much, much further in the future if the town were to maintain control of this area. Yes, if we're looking at the dollar amounts that were stated earlier, small amounts on a tax bill, but I also see that this money can be used for other things in town, paying for other services that can benefit the majority of people in town, and not just a small area, where we can get the benefit of, by these changes, of having a safer roadway and having more traffic move smoothly. And I think we're fooling ourselves to believe that the traffic is going to get any better just because we have control of it. More likely, it will be a safer, smoother, more accessible area by having traffic that is better controlled. Thank you.
Thank you. Bert?
Bert Schnetzler, I live on Meadow Road. No matter whether the state does it or whether the town does it, something has to happen on 117. The current situation, somebody talked about property values and how it hurts property values. I don't live in the center of town. However, I think the current situation is hurting my property values. I've never seen a real estate ad that said, come to Bolton, experience our 3 traffic jams every day at 8, 2:30, and 5. The 5 o'clock one has nothing to do with the schools. It's going to happen anyway. I've never seen a real estate ad that said, we have one of the intersections that's in the top 10% of the most dangerous intersections in the state. Never seen that in an ad, and that hurts my property values also. No matter whether the state does it or we do it, something has to happen. When I ride my bike into town, I take my life in my hands. I'm part of the Conservation Trust, and we're putting together the common. I would really like the people who live on the south side of 117 to be able to cross the road safely to get to the north side and get to the common. As a town, our history is we pay for nothing. You know, every time we see, you know, we build a new safety building once every 100 years or so, new library once every 100 years. We are a very, very cheap town. If we can put it to, if the state will pay for this, that's good. But the current situation just will not stand. It just is not a viable situation. Thank you.
Roger Breeze, 42 Pinewood Road. Every day, probably between 2 and 3 times a day, I go through a state-controlled intersection. I make a left-hand turn off 117 under Sugar Road. They've done such a phenomenal job there. I figure that somebody's going to get killed there, and it's going to be fairly soon. Because you cannot see the people that are racing west in 2 lanes of traffic while I'm trying to make a left. And the traffic light that's there is in such wonderful shape, you have no idea when the people going westbound or eastbound are going to get a red light. You would figure that on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, that the eastbound and the westbound lane would change at the same time. Now, if you got somebody coming off from 495 doing 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, you pause until, the only way you can make a left-hand turn is to pull into the intersection and wait till the light turns red. That is the only way you can do it. Now, if you got a green light still going there, you don't know when that green light's coming. You got a guy going 40 miles an hour. Oh, wait a minute. There's a guy beside him that wants to go 50. Because if they can go, there's 2 lanes wide that are going straight west. They're going to race to see who can be through the intersection first. Now, to me, that's not going to change the character of our town. The state does such a wonderful job. And I don't think that, I don't want to see them do the rest, what they've done to that intersection to the rest of the town.
Josh Halsey from 29 Water Aquatic, and someone already brought up this point that by having us here, the signals, it will drive more traffic, I think, down Manor Road, which is significantly narrow. Manor intersection with 117 is heavy with accident prone already, so I think you're going to increase that. We have children who walk down Manor Road to go to school. We have children who cross Manor to get to the wait for the school buses. So there's, I think, yes, putting signals here is going to make a somewhat of a difference, but I think it makes a difference in impact around us significantly. And we're talking about safety, that's safety to people who are on the streets. We're talking about bicyclists, we're talking about widening the road for bicyclists. Being honest, most bicyclists I see go down Manor. It's a narrow road. They play Frogger trying to get across 117 at Harvard intersection. You're not going to widen Manor. So in my opinion, you're just jamming everything down this very narrow road. We're talking about crosswalks to get to the common. That's nice, but we don't have a sidewalk that goes all the way. So from the police station forward, you're safe. After that, if you're parking over at the church or somewhere else, then it's not really helpful. For the water aquatic side, it was mentioned in the document that there may be changes to water aquatic. He focused on 117. According to this, it looks like you're not changing water aquatic. Is that true?
There would be no changes, I mean, no widening or anything on water aquatic.
So there'll be no physical changes to water aquatic at all?
No, probably would be, the pavement would be rebuilt, the sidewalks would be brought around and terminated at a logical location. But otherwise, there's really no room to modify that roadway without impacting some of those buildings on the corner, which we really felt we shouldn't.
Okay.
You know, could we get, the folks who haven't spoken first, I think we'll have time to get to you, but let's just go on. Now people are cutting ahead of you.
I'm
I'm sort of torn, actually. I don't know whether I'm in favor of it or not, but I agree with some of what Bert said earlier, that things have to get done. I think the status quo along this road cannot continue. That something has to be done at the intersection of Aquatic, probably at Manor. Don has mentioned that the most important intersection from his point of view is at 110. All those things need to get done, and money has to get spent. So it's either that the state spends the money or that the town spends the money. And I respectfully disagree with Al Ferry that the town has definitely shown with CPA and everything else that it does that it's unwilling to put money aside for this sort of thing. And so I'm really not sure. But so I think that for all of you who are opposed, that if this does go to a town meeting and you turn it down, that we're all obligated to start spending money on the infrastructure to improve this road.
Barbara Bing, Main Street, 74 Main Street. This is for Mr. Lorien. I'm just wondering, what is the actual probability of our getting new sidewalks if the state really takes over, both in the center of town and then extending down to 910?
So there are a couple scenarios that could lead to new sidewalks. One is the next time the roadway needs to be resurfaced, which probably wouldn't be for several years. As part of that work, we would look to work with the town to identify locations where the sidewalk was desirable and add the sidewalk at that time. Another opportunity would be simply if the town were to come to us and say, we need sidewalk for public safety for these reasons, and then we could look into a standalone project to add sidewalk. But what is the probability? It's hard to put a number on it, but all of our policies are headed in the direction of providing opportunities for all modes of transportation, and that includes pedestrians, walking, biking, and we really can't go in and do any type of project without making sure we're accommodating all modes of transportation now.
So the time frame would be probably when you next resurface the road.
I would say certainly then, and perhaps prior to that, if it was a request made by the town to do something.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martha Remington. I live on 117, east of 495. To set the record straight, the resurfacing of that road to the Stowe line was paid for by a grant that Anita Ware was able to get approved for the town. It was delayed for many years by the Big Dig. So now it's in better shape than it was in the mid-90s. I'm also chairman of the Historical Commission, and I can't believe the insensitivity of this drawing of the original center of our town. The public meeting place, the town meeting house, the town pound, potash site, they were all just out of the lower left portion of that. Overhead traffic control signals at this intersection in the National Register District, an extremely insensitive look. You can have post-traffic control systems that are not these huge flying overhead control systems. I'm a driving instructor. I see paint on the road, making left turns possible. All the paint is worn off because people do not leave that yellow lined area free. They go right over it. Wider roads, as someone said, make more traffic, faster traffic. And if you're worried about the left turn lane, it can be backed off a little bit so that it's not right up so close. There should be at least a 5-foot barrier between the stop line and the crosswalks in this drawing here.
as far as the most dangerous intersection in town at Route 110, for many years that light was poorly timed. There was a very short yellow light at that intersection. It's almost totally free as far as visibility, totally exposed, except there was a wooden fence that was put up at the brick house on Route 110. It's totally open. And even after the traffic light was fixed, we've had fatal accidents. It's because people don't respect the traffic laws. They go too fast. They don't pay attention. If we have a light here in the center of town, that means people making a right turn from Wattaquatic East will be able to make a right turn on red just before the people going east when they get their green light. It happens all the time now. People are making right turns on red when there is somebody in the right of way. So I think we need to rethink this traffic signal here. And I am of the opinion that at Manor and Harvard, if we have a light here, we're going to need a light at Manor and Harvard. But please, not an overhead light. Thank you.
I just want to address a couple of those points. What we do in historic districts with traffic signal equipment is usually it's all a black color, sometimes a matte finish, sometimes a glossy finish, and ornamental in nature. The community would get to pick out the type of equipment that's wanted. We find that the black blends in a little bit better. It matches some of street lighting. If the town chose to install street lighting as well, you can kind of match your street lighting to your signal equipment. The idea of going overhead is actually a federal requirement. If it's overhead, it's up at about 18 feet high. If it's post-mounted, it's about 10 feet high. And it can get, those post-mounted signals are often blocked by vehicles in front of you, especially trucks. So it's a matter of safety to go overhead. And we, nor anyone else in Massachusetts, installs the post-mounted type signals, except for if it's supplementing something overhead. So any signal put in at this intersection or any intersection, whether the town were to install it or Mass DOT were to install it, would need to be overhead. But we could accommodate the historic district concerned by going black and ornamental.
I'll go 207 Green Road. I just wanted to give you a couple of historical notes. 110 used to be the busy road, not 117, years ago. And we used to herd cows down 117. Years ago, I suggested that we do an overpass through town to redirect the traffic that was going through town. And everybody laughed. Well, it's not so funny anymore. The other thing that bothers me is you get the traffic coming east, all right? Your Green Road needs a light too. I mean, we may as well take some of the lights that you're going to put there and put them all along so everybody's safe. But we have, now I lost my train of thought. So the cars are coming this way, right? The lights from 110 and the lights at 495 are not coordinated. So you're trying to get out and all the traffic's coming this way and you see, gee, maybe now I've got a break, and the traffic starts coming from the other end. So you're boxed in and you can't get out. You have to take your life in your hands. And as far as bicycling goes, even years ago when my kids were riding the bikes, it wasn't safe then. So it's just, everything has been exasperated. So, anyway.
David Wiley, Green Road. A couple of quick questions. One, does anyone challenge the $12 a year estimate that this gentleman provided about what not turning it over to the state would cost? If anybody challenges that, I'd certainly like to hear that. Second question is it a certainty that the state would have corrected the Sampson Road culvert problem, and that they would have done it when the town wanted it done. I'm not familiar with the Sampson Road culvert details, but I'm just wondering if that really is a sound, a fair example of what we would have saved if this had happened some time ago.
I'd just like to, I guess, state that for emergencies like that, we have, in this instance, we have an emergency drainage repair contract with a contractor essentially on standby, ready to go. We manage over 3,000 lane miles in central Massachusetts, and so we need to have contracts available like that. If there was a culvert on any state highway that was brought to our attention that it was in danger of collapsing or it had collapsed, we immediately dispatch that crew, take whatever I guess action we need to divert traffic, to manage traffic, replace the culvert. So we have processes set up to address that specific concern, and contractors ready to go.
If I could just add one comment, the example of the Sampson Road culvert that was repaired last summer, in terms of an order of magnitude, that culvert's on Sampson Road.
There was just a delay. There was a delay.
Because it's not on 117. The two culverts that were mentioned in Mr. Brown's report are similar scope and nature to that. We use that as an example to an order of magnitude cost. But those two other culverts that we discussed are going under 117.
Thank you. Let me just make one or two comments. I think by and large we've heard a sort of a worst possible situation summary of all the problems ahead, which all of a sudden it seems are here today because this thing has come up. That's one thing I just want to comment on. Second, I want to thank the gentleman from the state for making it very clear at the last meeting, the Selectmen heard him, that this is the first proposal in 15 years for the state to ask a town, in this case 2 towns, Bolton and Lancaster, how would you like to turn over one of your town roads to the state? That says a lot. He says, in fact, all around the state, what they've been doing lately is just the opposite. Turning back, asking towns, will they take state highway right-of-ways back into the town? But here, they want to hook up 2 interstate highways. They want to move traffic. And so when I hear them talking about we're going to improve your safety, I just have to be dubious. That's not the primary, it can't possibly be the primary aim. The primary aim is to move traffic. And this country went through a period a whole generation ago when building highways was a hot thing to do for any number of reasons. And then it came to be generally understood that to better your highways, the more traffic they move. And that's been commented on tonight. And that is so true, and that's a lesson that I can remember going back a whole generation. You don't build new highways just to move traffic. You have to think about what are the other costs. And in Bolton, the cost to a very fine bunch of Bolton citizens and homeowners is unfair. It is unfair for the town government, and it's unfair for other residents of the town to say, oh, these folks are expendable. Their values are expendable. And to say even more that the historic value to the country, to the state, to our town, the historic value is of so little account that we'll just turn it into a highway, a state highway. Thanks.
I live at 655 Main Street. Moved in there with my family about a year and a half ago.
family is from this area, the family that I married into. So very familiar with Bolton, and was very excited when we found our place here on Main Street. I agree that there has to be some work done to the roads and to the sidewalks, but I think every town in the city I've ever lived in, I have felt that way. I really do feel that way about the sidewalks here. However, I don't feel like that's a reason to give the control over to the state. I agree with a lot that's been spoken tonight, so I'm not going to sit here and reiterate all of that. But one thing in particular, I like the point when you came, and I'm sorry, it's my first meeting, so I'm getting used to everybody's names. But I like the fact that this gentleman here from the state did address these 4 questions right off the bat and didn't leave us all hanging and wondering. So just to talk about one of them, that's really important to me, and it links into the town comment. It was very, very exciting. I remember I almost hit a car in front of me when I saw the signs going up because I love Bolton, and I knew what I was getting into when I moved to this town from the city, just meaning that it's the town, not the city. But I, for one, would love to have a little bit more places to shop. Now, that's a discussion for another meeting because I realize that there are people in the town that don't necessarily want to bring in other areas, and I completely can understand their perspective. But I'm tying these 2 things together. I do have a point here. By saying that there's no parking on 117, this means it almost shuts the door on any potential discussions to be able to maybe bring in some small mom and pop type shops. And then also I'm thinking about this beautiful common and but if there's nowhere to park, I mean, and the sidewalks are great. I also have people in my family that rely on wheelchairs, and I rely heavily on the double wide stroller, so the sidewalks are important. But if those sidewalks can't get us to places, then they aren't as important. So I'm really opposed to turning this over to the state. Just to reiterate one in particular thing, in addition to everything else that was talked about, especially just the feeling of this town and the historicness of this town, and things that were brought up here tonight too. I promised I wouldn't reiterate what everybody said, but so many things were brought up, just the small things like the extra pain of the large, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about this topic, but the large intersections and everything else. But once again, if, we need to be able to have the opportunity to have discussions around parking and what's going to happen on Main Street. And it's hard enough to get things done when you're discussing things within your town. And if you're going to bring the state into all those discussions, I think that a lot of those decisions will take even longer to make. So thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for being patient here.
Craig Roberts, I'm Tony on Main Street, like before. So I had a couple of minor things to talk about. The question to the chief about parking tickets for parking on the highway or on the 117 in the future, if it gets turned over to the state. I'm not sure the chief actually has, certainly you can give tickets, but I would think that the state police driving through town could do that at any time they like. So even if our chief doesn't want to, that doesn't mean somebody's not going to get a ticket.
I think didn't we discuss at the last meeting that there would be a sort of an initial decision by the state police as to whether they were going to cede jurisdiction to the town or not.
Even so, if that comes up to the decision that the state police have control, then whatever the chief wants to do, someone's going to get a ticket for parking on that highway. So, or at least potentially, depending on the mood of the state policeman. Not that important to me, but anyway. The 117 rebuild east of 495. I've been here 17 years, and I know you weren't there, but there was quite the hubbub when that was done, because it seemed to me, and many people, that 30 feet on both sides of the road was clear cut. That might be a slight exaggeration, but it tremendously changed the character of that road, and many people thought for the worst. I can assume that something similar to that would happen clear to 190 if this were undertaken. Let's see. As far as the backups on 117 in the morning, I can't get there in the morning to see, but I suspect even the simplest traffic lights at Aquatic would fix that. I don't really blame the school for this. I blame one car coming in from 117, one car coming in from Aquatic Road. and some confusion each time whether somebody's going to go or not. You know, the average speed will be 1 mile an hour, and there you go. Sidewalks out of town, out near my place, or even not so far out to my place. I asked Mr. Lorian via the phone a week or two ago about sidewalks and whose problem it is to shovel them or clear them. And my understanding is from Mr. Lorian that it would be up to the town whether the town spends money to get them cleared, or if they said to me, go clear your 150 feet of sidewalk, not far from 30 feet of pavement that just got drawn onto the sidewalk.
That actually is our current bylaw. I think the homeowner's supposed to do it.
Sure.
So, but I'm a little behind. I'm on like 200 feet this winter.
Sure. No, I'm talking about my frontage happens to be 200 feet, whatever, 150 feet. And, you know, it's going to kind of be awful because I've already got 10 feet of driveway to do. Add to that another 200 feet, 150 feet, you know, times 3 miles or whatever. It might be kind of awful. What else was there? Oh, I don't know what the current plan is, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more lights on the way to town. I know during the last meeting, Mr. Lawyer talked about a flashing red and yellow light at the North Road intersection. Wouldn't surprise me to see one at Green Road, as someone else said, which may or may not be a good idea. And also at Manor. So we could easily see ourselves turning into a town full of lights. 1 or 2 more things.
All right, well, let's pick it up. This is your second bite of the apple here. We're over time. We want to get Dan in.
We're talking about, from 2009, I saw a story in the Boston Herald saying that the state, as a state, for their roads pays between $300,000 and $600,000 per road mile per year. So I can fully expect we're adding 11 miles to that. So that's $3 to $6 million in extra costs coming to the state. They're going to come out of somewhere, and it's probably only $5, $6 up per household, but you know, it's something. We might get considerably better service out of it, but that's about all I had to say, I guess. Oh, one more thing. In contrast to Ms. Rogers, who I don't see here anymore, she was encouraging you to bring it to town meeting, and that's maybe reasonable, but I would encourage you not to, because I would think that the role of selectmen, not to tell you what it is, but it might be to stand up for the little guy. The little guy in this case is 63 houses or thereabouts that are going to be affected by this directly.
Dan?
Daniel Senni, 324 Still River. I've lived in 3 places for any significant length of time in my life. Been here 21 years. Spent part of my childhood in the Berkshires, and I've lived in Manhattan, New York City. This is the least walkable and the least safe place that I have lived in terms of the safety of the roads, both in a car, especially on foot. And getting on a bicycle here is nuts, in my opinion. In New York City, you can walk anywhere in New York. They spend an incredible amount of money on pedestrian safety. They've now put bike lanes down the avenues to the detriment of traffic, but they've done it. We're driving up from a gig down there. It took us a long time up there. The Berkshires, rural towns. I lived in the town of Dalton when I was a kid. Arguably, at least as historic a town as this one. Everybody in this room has in their wallet a piece of paper that came from the town of Dalton. It's your money. The town has an incredible history. The town of Dalton has 2 state highways through it. It has Route 8 and has Route 9, which actually starts there. When I lived in Dalton, I lived about 100 yards from where Route 9 starts on the western terminus. There we had sidewalks in Dalton. We had sidewalk plows. We walked to school. It was a mile to the school from where we were. We were within the radius of where the school buses were. I would like to see something happen. I think Ken Troop had the right comment, and it's my thought as well. I don't know if turning it over to the state is the only answer or the right answer, but fixing things somehow and improving the safety is the right answer. So if we bring this to town meeting, and I'm not opposed to that, in fact, I encourage it, I would like it to be there with additional warrant articles for making things happen, doing the engineering and doing the repairs needed to improve the safety. Let's bring them together. It's really a combined debate. The debate should not be, should we be safer or not? I think we need to deal with the safety issues. The question is really, how do we want to pay for that? CPA would help in terms of sidewalks. Look at Littleton, look at several of the other local towns that have done, Stowe has done a great job with that. I'd like to see some safety improvements. I don't know what the right answer is to the center of town. When we moved here, I'll make one final comment. We looked at a house on Harvard Road. We ultimately rejected it and moved to Still River Road when we bought it. Why? Because we were going to be on the north side of 117, and there was no chance in the morning of getting out of Harvard Road and onto 117 to get to work. So on Still River, we at least have a traffic light, as out of repair as it is. Harold's doing his best to keep it functioning somewhat. But we need to make sure that we provide for safe transit for all residents of the town. Thank you.
Can I make just one quick comment about what has been said about adding another article to the warrant for some repairs and so forth? That's a fine idea, and I don't object to that in the least. But I would plead with the town government not to use that, not to game that as a means of seeming to give the town meeting a choice by beefing it up with a whole lot of things that ought to come serially and in time and over years. Please don't load a whole lot of things that have been totally neglected until the state highway business came up. Put them into a single warrant article and then say, well, take your choice, town meeting attendees. Either vote for the state to do it or pass this huge budget for safety and so forth. I plead with you, be fair about what you put into the warrant on that subject.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. One more thing I forgot to mention. Mr. Lorian said tonight, no on-street parking will be allowed. I have checked Acton, Concord, Lexington, Wayland, and Sudbury about parking, and on their numbered routes, except in Wayland on Route 20, they allow parking in the historic districts. Thank you. On-street parking.
So the comments there. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll get to you, Barry.
One last comment from the last speaker. Obviously, it would be very inappropriate to put any article on the town warrant to vote for money to do any type of improvement or change, because before we could do that, even though we own the road, we don't have the ability on our own to do any of this without approval by the state. So the prudent thing would be first to, whatever project we decide we want to move forward with, we would first have to get approval by the state to allow us to do that, and then an article would be put on the warrant. But we just can't raise money to do something if we don't have the approval or the authority to do that, and that would be the case for any type of improvement on the subject.
Thank you. Barry, could you address, there was a comment about, it's a little off topic, but the problems at Sugar Road with the current light structure, because the situation, the dangerous situation on 495 was dramatically improved by the state's changes, but there is still a problem with Sugar Road. But could you address what sort of the status of that project?
I don't think I'm prepared to address your specific concern. I forget what the gentleman is now. However, I am going to speak with our traffic engineering section tomorrow and have them send two of our traffic engineers out, the two who designed the system, to get a better understanding of that concern, and we'll take some action.
Don, you did?
And I raised some other concerns relative to that intersection that weren't discussed tonight that are going to be addressed as well. But just some comments from me. I guess I should hold myself to the same standard as everybody else. I'm Don Lowen, your town administrator, and therefore your chief executive officer. And first of all, to clear up one thing, this is not a matter of the state coming in and saying we want to take the road over. This is a matter of back in 2013, I met with the state, Barry's boss and some of his staff at the time, to talk about an existing issue that was going on. That was properly addressed ultimately. And while we were together, I said, you know, we've got a lot of safety issues here that, you know, I don't know how we're going to be able to address. What if the state took over the road and took over responsibility for those repairs, those infrastructure improvements? And his boss said, well, maybe we should take a look at that. So, you know, so we started the conversation in the summer of 2013. And I don't think there's anything that we shouldn't be able to talk about. And we're nowhere near actually taking action, but I think the discussion tonight has been wonderful. You know, this is what government is all about, people weighing in and offering their opinions. And I'm very proud to say that next month I'll be here 6 years, and now I can look around the room and I know just about everybody in the room. You know, we have new people in here, but I'm delighted about that. And I want you to know that I respect every one of your opinions and every one of your concerns. I don't take anyone's concerns lightly. And one thing that this conversation has accomplished already is that something, I'm confident something is going to be done about the infrastructure issues here. Because as many people have said, nothing has been done for quite some time. And if nothing else, this conversation has jump-started that topic. I can look around this room and I see many people who are in this room who worked on a study in 2002 that has a lot of recommendations that are being talked about. And we're coming up on the 13th anniversary of that study, and nothing's been done. So if nothing else, we can jumpstart that. Whether this ever goes forward or not, and I don't get a vote on it, whether this goes forward or not, you know, something I think will be done because we've started this conversation. And one other thing that I'd like to share with you, something that I took away from our last meeting that I started researching the very next day, was I have here the process that we could follow if the town chose to want to try and ban truck traffic on Waterquatic Hill Road. And if that's something that the town would like to do, I would absolutely love to lead that effort, work with whoever I need to work with, and try to accomplish that. I understand what would need to be done. So again,
it starts with an engineering study,
starts with an engineering study. We would need to do a traffic study. So I mean, nothing gets done without money. But we certainly wouldn't spend money for the sake of spending money. And again, this is a byproduct of having this conversation. So I think conversation is good, and we're trying to do this. The selectmen and I are trying to do this with all the best intentions, and I think we're all concerned about the impact on Main Street as well as the entire town. So that's all I've got to say.
Kia Oceanbine, I'm one of those people who worked on that report, and thank you for reading it. It was a lot of effort. One of the other byproducts I'm hoping maybe you as an administrator and selectman would endorse is having the state do a speed review of the speed limit in front of the high school that we had talked about in 2002. I went to the Lancaster meeting that Mr. Lorian gave, and the Lancaster people were also very concerned with the high speed limit allowed in front of the high school. And if I'm correct, at that meeting, you implied that the speed review can be done at any time, independent of what we're talking about here. And it sounds like even the state sort of was hinting that they might agree that the speed limit was a little high there. So could you
But it doesn't make
initiate
sense
that?
to do the speed review until you get the speed down. But Mr. Lorien had the idea at the last meeting, which I guess Mr. Brown could implement, which was to bring the lane width down to 11 feet by the high school, which would slow people down. So when the review gets done, your data involves cars that are hopefully moving slower, right?
Yes, but I mean, I don't think that's going to happen too quickly. So could we do the speed review, because he was talking about how but he mentioned that 7 mile per hour difference, that you can be 7 mile per hour different and still get the lower speed limit, which I think if you did a study, an equal study, if you take into consideration all day long, there are a lot of times when cars are moving slowly there. And one other thing, I know at the last meeting you talked a lot about working with the community and being cooperative. But I have to say your track record in this town isn't so good, because we did a speed review around Manor Road, and it turned out quite, you know, it was within the 7 miles per hour, but it didn't get lowered. So I don't know why that didn't get lowered, and it's a critical place where going through Manor Harvard Road, the speed limit is 45.
Right, but that goes to the point we currently don't have control, so over some aspects of the road.
Right, but I think now that they've looked at it, and maybe you asked for a review, they might want to prove that they will work with us. And it sounded at the Lancaster meeting that you looked upon that very favorably.
So we're able to review speed limits at the request of the town. We require some data be provided to us from the town, generally from the police department. So we're happy to work with, we can work through the administrator's office to acquire some of that initial data, and then our engineers can take a look at that. I do think, though, that currently the speeds in front of the high school are not going to be such that we're able to lower that speed limit significantly. There's simply too much pavement there. And we don't look at the speed of vehicles during a constrained time. We look at the speed of vehicles during an unconstrained time. So I would suggest that before we start collecting data, that some type of traffic calming occurs, such as narrowing the travel lanes, which we feel does have traffic calming impact. But we're happy to work with the town. Typically, the town provides us some data. We complete our study. We go back to the town with a recommendation and generally say, well, this is where we could set the speed based on the data that we have and our observations, and then the town makes a decision if they want to accept that or not. So we can start that process now.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thanks to everyone. We actually were a little behind. We have a public hearing next. And this is a continuation of a public hearing on the application of Condyne Capital Partners for site plan review for 2,500 square foot assisted living facility at 580 Main Street, Bolton. This hearing began on November 6th and been continued 5 times. Mr. Dibbs? Oh, excellent. Well, we can take a 2-minute recess here. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Mr. Dibbs.
Again, Mark Dibb with Condyne Engineering Group on behalf of the applicant, Condyne Capital Partners. The project again is 580 Main Street. It's known as the Bolton Office Park. It's proposed an assisted living facility in the rear of that parcel. Since the last time we spoke, we've made a lot of progress through some of the other boards and Conservation Commission. We met with the Selectmen and Planning Board and Design Review Board, as well as Conservation. We have Conservation approval. Design Review Board essentially has given their blessing for the project. We've responded to all their comments.
We got a report from the design review, which I think back in the beginning of January, they said they were still looking for some submissions from you, but I understand since then they've seen those follow-up submissions.
Correct, yeah, there were 3 minor little items. I can point them out if we need to, but we feel we satisfied their request, as well as the planning board closed their hearing, and we're awaiting the draft of the special permit and their final approval of that at the next meeting. If you'd like, I could go through a list of changes, or maybe hit on, I don't know if you have some specific concerns, or hit on some of the major topics that changed. Or...
Yeah, well, maybe we could hit some, what I saw as maybe some of the high points, and other people have some additional questions, but I know at some point there was discussions with the planning board about a gravel drive, giving access to the town property. Could you point that out? And then you just tilt that board slightly so we could see it as well.
The gravel drive is access to the town gardens and the field in the back, the far rear of the property. It's actually Bolton property, but as a result of the original special permit in the 80s, that access was required, so we're required to maintain that access. I don't know if I need this thing like the microphone or not, but we're continuing to provide that access to the back. Right now, comes off the existing parking. This blue line is the gravel. We're basically just relocating it slightly to maintain that access. We will maintain access even through construction, primarily maintain access through construction to those fields as part of the original special permit.
Okay. You also, I know there was discussion about an easement to Bolton Country Manor. Could you point that out to us? Sort of where that is, and then explain the sort of status of where that is.
The easement and the parking spaces. This is the Country Manor. It's off the sheet. I do have a different page if you want. The easement is right here. The darkest line is the property line. This intermediate dashed line is the easement, and then the anticipated proposed additional parking spaces for the Bolton Manor is shown here. The reason for that is there's some parking on the Bolton office property existing that gets used as overflow for Bolton Manor. And some of that will be removed and kind of reconfigured. So in an attempt to allow some additional spaces, we've proposed that. We've also proposed to build those spaces during construction. And then RCAP, I believe, is the owner of the Bolton Manor lot. They're in general agreement with the easement. We will have some legal things to work out regarding
If I move in any closer, you won't see
how
my
exactly
face on the
it's going to work, but I'm told through conversations with them that they are in agreement that the easement will work. We'll have to work out the final details of that. But we did propose, we have, as of the last planning board meeting, we proposed to construct those as well.
You probably heard more about sidewalks and stuff than you wanted to while you're sitting here waiting for your hearing, but on this property, how is the sidewalk access going to be handled?
pedestrian access within the site will be greatly increased. We're proposing, just a quick overview, this is Main Street out here. This is the main Bolton Office Park driveway. It veers off to the existing office building, nothing is changing with that. It also, this is the Bolton Manor, there's a driveway here, as well as the new building in the back of the lot. We're proposing sidewalk, which there currently isn't any, from the Bolton Manor anywhere. Proposing sidewalk all the way out to the front, and then across the frontage of the property. It does exist. It's on the
Going west, yeah.
Going west, it does exist, but there is none from our driveway to there's the lacrosse fields here, and there's the new bank proposal. So we are proposing to bring it across in the areas of our property. However, right now, we are not proposing anything further for that lacrosse portion. At the planning board, we stated we're kind of balancing between a construction cost or a mitigation of that sidewalk versus constructing these parking lots.
Okay.
So we kind of balance that and agreed to build those parking spaces. We feel like it's on our property, and it's something we would take care of versus this little segment in between the two parcels. As well as there's another sidewalk across here that will allow easier pedestrian access.
All right, I don't have any other questions.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, there was no other significant real changes as a result of the final approvals, other than just some details and some,
Could you just, maybe on an overview sheet, show us some of the little tweaks that happened from design review?
Especially on the building is what the design review really touched on. Some of there's a lot more windows and trim shown right now than the original proposal. You can actually see this is the original. There's a loading area that had a flat roof. They didn't like it. We've changed that. There's an angled roof on top and removed some of this area here, as well as there was a large arched window in front, things like that. We have changed their suggestion. And the landscaping plan, which is we did things like giving some shade trees to this features associated with the landscaping. We're providing user walkways in the back for activities and things like that. We had bench areas proposed. We've moved some shade trees out to those areas to provide shade, things like that, and provided more trees near the building that would create winter interest, like pine trees or other types of things. Those were some of the design review board comments that we've addressed. A lot of it had to do with the architecture.
And as I understand it, there isn't you don't have a final sort of customer or a user for this space, and so when someone comes in, they may want to make some design changes, and how are you proposing those be handled?
Correct. We do have a lot of interest right now, actually. We have 3 particular people looking at the project, or groups looking at the project. We understand it's highly unlikely that someone's going to take this drawing and want to build it exactly. We'll come first to the departments within the town hall and discuss the changes, and it's likely we'll have to come back to, a site, I don't know if it's redo the site plan review or modify it, but there's likely changes would happen, depending on specific reason. We can, at least now we can mark it.
Sure, you have an approved project and you're able to get someone in there, but recognizing that if they want to change this, they're going to have to come back and talk to the folks in the town. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and even in, I think, in the plan, I haven't seen the final planning board decision, but definitely going back to the design review board, I think verbatim, we have to go back at least to show them the proposal, final proposal.
All right, well, no, we appreciate your sort of efforts and your, making these changes. Martha, you'd like to get up and talk to the microphone again.
Chairman Delaney, I haven't been to this hearing since the very first time it was open.
Seriously, I don't think you're going to be on the video if you're not at the microphone.
Oh, I don't care.
Oh, but your fans will.
I was just curious about lighting. There's going to be some lighting around parking areas or whatever
for
this. I just didn't see any on this diagram.
I'm sure my understanding is you spent a lot of time talking about lighting. Why don't you?
Just the style of what they are like.
We have provided a photometric plan to the planning board, giving the foot candle levels that the light will produce. The majority of the parking areas will be full cutoff, meaning that those boxed, pretty standard parking lights that you see. There won't be any floodlights pointed out at neighboring properties. One thing the photometric plan shows is that we're not overflowing out a light off the property. But in general, it'll be similar to what's out there now in the parking lot, with the exception of possibly some ornamental lights just around the front entrance and things like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right.
Move that we, I guess, accept the site plan as presented.
Maybe close the hearing first?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we approve it. As presented.
I'll second that.
I don't know whether or not condition that any changes would need to come back to us, or that'll happen.
I think that happens by
Okay.
automatically.
Make sure we're covered here, so. Okay.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll generate a written decision by our next meeting. The next item on our agenda is the town administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The building committee, Minuteman Building Committee meeting scheduled for Monday was called on account of epic snow. So I have nothing to report. The big reveal will be tomorrow morning at the meeting that I talked about in the past. It'll be held at 7:45 at Minuteman. So we will be seeing all the options then, and the building committee meeting, the joint building committee, and school committee meeting has been rescheduled for next Monday the 9th. So I have nothing to report tonight.
All right. We now are on Board of Selectmen business, and the first item is called the caucus for March 9th, 2015.
We call the Citizens Caucus to take place at the Bolton Public Library on Monday, March 9th, 2015 at 7:30 p.m.
I will second that.
Before we vote, I just want to say that I have decided that I will be a candidate for selectman again. My term is up, but I think it's been an honor to work with this current board. I think and to some degree, after only 3 years, you barely learned about the position of selectman. So I'm game for another 3 years. But all those in favor of scheduling the Citizens Caucus for March 9th?
Aye.
Aye? Opposed? All right. Our next item on our agenda is a continuation of this discussion regarding the Jake break bylaw.
You want to deal with this,
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the request to overspend snow and ice, line item 423 by $150,000.
Just so you know, this was approved by advisory on Tuesday night, and as of the February 2nd warrant, we'd already spent $200,697.58. We have bills that we know about outstanding of $44,906.26. We also know we have outstanding bills that haven't been submitted yet that we don't know how much they are. And just for your information, the biggest storm, Juno, I guess you have to be really big to get a name, but the named storm that we had, that cost alone in labor and material was in excess of $39,000. And that doesn't, I don't believe, include any damage, maintenance issues that we had, repair issues that we had with the vehicles. So we already know that one storm cost us $39,000.
You know, these costs sort of bring to mind, there was a letter to the, a letter in the paper a couple weeks ago suggesting again that that everyone is wrong, the Department of Revenue, the town accountant, the selectmen, in terms of having a level of free cash. But I think this illustrates part of the need for free cash, that you have these sort of events that come up, and that for a short period of time you can do deficit spending on snow and ice, but by the beginning of the next year you've either got to put it in the tax rate or you've got to pay it off. And that's why we're lucky that we're in a position where we have enough free cash, hopefully, unless the snows continue, to cover this next year. So, all right, so we need a motion on that?
Authorize overspending snow and ice line item by $150,000.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we're at the Jake break bylaw continuation.
And you have a slightly revised version. You have, it was tweaked as recently as this afternoon, I believe. And you should have a copy of that. One of the things that became apparent, Mr. Chairman, in talking with some of our department heads, is that all of our fire trucks and some of our DPW trucks have Jake brakes. So I recommended to Erica that she speak with Jonathan, or email Jonathan. Jonathan is here tonight, to put an exemption in for our municipal vehicles, and I believe Jonathan was fine with that. That's why that's in there. It just seemed like, once we learned that, it just seemed like a common sense thing to do, and everybody was fine with that.
But, I mean, we already had a qualification that in case of emergency, anybody can make use of that.
True, but I mean, a fire truck on the road is probably acting on an emergency, but a DPW vehicle may not be.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
If they were going to hit something, it would be an emergency.
It's not the only time they might apply the brake. It just seemed to make sense to expressly exempt our town vehicles and take any potential ambiguity right out of it.
What does that say?
Yeah.
It didn't make it. It should be in there. If it's not in there, it will get in there.
It's not in this.
I think you see before you
Mr. Chairman, did you hear from Harold Garland about this? Did you hear from Harold, the DPW director, about this bylaw? Did he weigh in?
He weighed in that some of the DPW trucks have jake brakes.
Did he weigh in with an opinion on the bylaw?
I'm not going to speak for that.
And, yeah, no, obviously, we haven't heard from him.
He hasn't objected to it.
Michael, you go to the microphone.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a bit confused. I thought after our first meeting, I think this is the first continuation of this. Wasn't it decided that we would try putting up signage first and not have a bylaw at this time?
That suggestion was made, and there was some sentiment in favor, but I don't think a decision was made.
Oh, okay.
Decision either way hasn't been made yet.
Oh, okay.
Whether to do that, whether to put this on the warrant or not put this on the warrant.
I did leave a message for Chief Alfano yesterday. I saw a neat sign in Leominster that said, use of engine brakes prohibited. Really nice sign.
Is there a fine? I'm looking at Erica's, she did send one this afternoon. The exemptions, it does say the provisions of this bylaw shall not apply in the event of an emergency or to drivers of vehicles owned by the town of Bolton. So that was added. And I'm sorry, it's not on that one.
Okay. This draft seemed to have more details on the how enforcement is. Is this a change from what we've seen before?
Doctor, can you speak to that? I really didn't have any detailed discussion about that.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we discussed kind of the federal guidelines, and that's where we kind of pegged the enforcement to the federal guidelines for, decibels as measured by a decibel meter that would be used by the town police. So that is additional language.
Jonathan, what are your thoughts on this idea of maybe we should first try a suggestion and see if a sign that requests this courtesy from truckers and see how that goes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think with quality of life issues, it's about percentages, so it's not about getting to 100%, it's about getting to 30, 40, 50%, and hopefully over time up to 75% kind of reduction in the use of jake brakes. So I think it's important not to kind of, kick this down the road and try, just the signs. I think it's important to have a sign with the fine on it. And, that's the beginning. And I think that, those signs with the fine on it are going to reduce, this quality of life nuisance by, some percentage. And that's going to be great. And then it would be great also to have the help of the Bolton Police, stopping trucks that are really loud. I've been out on my roof this week raking it, and I've noticed, I think it was like 1 out of 12 trucks that just went by and it sounded like a car in terms of braking. They didn't use their jake brakes, but all the other ones do, and it's just, it's hard, it's hard to understand kind of why they're doing it. It's so loud. It's like a drag race sound through town, and yeah.
Oh, so that's an interesting percentage, though. So you'd say it's more than 90% of them are opt for the jake brakes.
They do. I've never had a problem with the town vehicles. I've never heard them, never heard squeaky brakes. I mean, this sound is like boom, 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 boom. And it's really dramatic. It's much different than any other vehicle. Yeah. So there was definitely added language in there about, you know, mufflers that are not in good repair or mufflers that have been souped up or hot rodded. So those are two things, you know, that if motorcyclists have, you know, or cars have bad mufflers, or they, you know, they've modified them to sound like they're hot rods, you know, policemen stop, you know, those types of vehicles, I think,
Yeah, I got 21.
routinely in the state and in the country for, you know, that type of noise.
It should. It's almost over.
So I think going along with this proposal, and this, the chief may be able to chime on this, presumably
10 minutes.
their budget would need to be increased to buy the equipment, provide the training, the calibration, and then overtime for the officers to go to court. Do we have that?
I think that's part of it, but I think.
But doesn't that really need to go along with this bylaw? That you also need, that another piece of this has to be increasing the budget there too.
Yeah, there could be a follow-up piece to that, but I also think even without that equipment, I think there are mufflers going through town that are not properly maintained or have been modified, and I think those vehicles can be stopped and given warnings or fines as part of this. So, you know, we can get the decibel meter and do that training as well. So it's kind of, you know, we're trying to reduce the use of Jake brakes by percentages, and hopefully we'll get up to 75% in 4 or 5 years. And that's going to make a big difference in how everybody feels about the town. It's going to make a big difference on when real estate agents show houses near a lot of roads in town. I think it's really important.
Keith?
I was just going to address some of the comments that Chief Albano made at the previous meeting about the extra fees, and I hate to disagree, but I sort of think that excuse about extra court time is a little crazy, because, I mean, you give extra court time applies to every ticket you write on every other thing. So, I mean, you don't not have any speed tickets because you're afraid your officers are going to go to court. I mean, does that make sense to you?
I don't think anyone's saying that we're afraid that officers go to court. I think there's a legitimate question that was raised that this bylaw, if enacted, will require an increase to the budget of the police department. That's all that
Well, it doesn't really, because as Jonathan said, if you feel like you don't have, if you're running low on hours of court time, you can issue more warnings. I mean, isn't it under their discretion whether they give a warning or a ticket? And a warning, there's no court time.
Well, forget about the court time. There's sound equipment that has to be purchased, has to be calibrated, training that has to be done, and stipends if whatever it might have to be. But all we're saying is that in conjunction with this, the police department's budget has to increase. And has that been quantified? No one's saying that we shouldn't do it. No one's saying that we shouldn't go to court. It's simply a matter of the budget has to increase. And I think that's a legitimate question. And how much does the police department budget have to increase?
But it does sound like you're sort of pushing to exaggerate it by using court time or this.
No, it's a simple statement. It's a simple statement. The budget has to increase in order to accommodate the bylaw. And do we know how much the budget has to increase? It's a simple statement. It's not leading anything on. It's not trying to exaggerate. It's a simple question. The budget has to increase, and have we quantified how much the budget has to be increased?
I mean right now, when the chief does his budget, I mean, they have pretty good historic information of how many speeding tickets are we gonna issue, how much court time do we need to budget for. We're now adding a new class of tickets. That's gonna increase the amount of court time, so we need to quantify that amount so we can add that to the budget. I'm not saying don't go to court, I'm not saying don't issue the tickets. I'm just saying, you know, bottom line is, for the chief to implement this bylaw, he's gonna need more money. It's a simple fact. So, you know, he can't do a lot more with not giving him the resources to do it. So the question to Jonathan was, have we been able to quantify that value, that number? Because that's going to go hand in hand with the that needs to go hand in hand with the presentation for town meeting to adopt, to vote on this.
Because someone will invariably ask that question.
Right. Well,
it will be offset some by the ticket
Well,
revenue,
I'm
but
down
that doesn't go to the police department directly, so.
Well,
that was the question that I didn't really get an answer to.
Well,
you could also sort of cut back. I guess what I'm saying is you could minimize it. It's in your control to minimize it by either doing more warning, you know, for 2 years, warnings only. And as for training, I gotta say I'm not sure you have to train that many people because you pretty much know where and when the Jake breakers are the most offensive. You know, it's probably, 10 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning. And, in certain places, you kind of know it's like going down the hill near Fox Run, coming down Waterquatic near the police, and in front of Jonathan and...
I doubt Jonathan was out between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. breaking his rules. So from his numbers, it's all day, every day. So,
Exactly, all day, every day.
It is, but I'm just saying that, if you want to start small and you don't have that much money, it would be worth it to have the bylaw, to have a fine, and to minimize the cost for the first couple of years by, just training a few, getting the worst case offenders. Once you do a couple warnings for a couple trucks, they all know, they will all talk to each other. They're all the same truckers coming through the same, timing. A couple of warnings is going to do a huge amount of good right off the bat. I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it's very little effort for a big increase in quality of life.
Well, I live right across the street from Jonathan, and I really support this legislation or this bylaw. But I mean, I have to say, if we don't have any documentation, any evidence, and we're taking somebody to court, it's going to be a waste of effort, and the judge is just going to throw it out, and that overtime, whatever we calculated to be, will just be gone. And I think we should support. I guess I'm not wearing my advisory committee hat when I say that, but there are expenses here, and I think we have to take them into consideration. But I urge that we try to do whatever research is necessary to come up with what the cost of this will be and present it at town meeting, but present the bylaw as such. I mean, give the chief what he needs, because otherwise, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me to bring somebody to court and have them just throw it out. That's all I have to say.
Mark at 985 Main Street. I have a real simple solution to figure this out, how much it'll cost. Do what's called a soft rollout. We do this all the time. First year, just issue warnings, see how many warnings you issue, and then next year you're going to know how many tickets you're going to do, although it probably will get around and then the warnings will decrease off. You won't have to buy one piece of equipment. You can just tell people. Anyone can tell you, hearing a Jake break is the easiest thing in the world. I live 600 feet from Main Street in 985, up on the big hill there. I can hear a Jake break through my windows, okay? You don't have to be a rocket scientist, okay? You don't need a piece of equipment. I mean, I could stand out there, I could tell you every truck it does a jailbreak. It's very simple. Issue a warning, done. Simple. First year, second year, we'll know how many we did. Is it worth it to buy equipment, do things? Can we make money? Great, great idea. Simple.
Sure. One of the things you pay me for is to look at the big picture. It's very easy to make decisions. Let's make a law and make something illegal. I have to live with the big picture. One of the things that you pay me for is to make sure the town, as best as we can help it, doesn't get sued. I have a lot of concerns about this bylaw. I understand and I sympathize about the noise because I think I've lost some fillings in the past with Jake breaks. But if we're going to do something about the Jake breaks, we have to do it in a correct way. And I don't feel that rushing this bylaw through is the correct way to do it. Yes, there are cost considerations. It was brought up as a suggestion to buy sound equipment. My budget's been level funded for 8 years. I can't even replace my radar units. I don't have the money. So I'm going to go out and buy a sound unit? That's not good common sense. The officers have to be certified in any sound equipment that we purchase. It has to be good sound equipment, not the $375 Amazon special. It has to be something that would be accepted in court. Officers work rotating schedules, so all officers would have to be trained. They would have to be trained on overtime, a cost. We've already been told by other police chiefs and by the court system that the signs that you see out there in other communities, because I've done my homework and I've called the other communities, the sign that Martha saw in Leominster, not one single ticket has been written on that sign. It was put up to appease somebody. It's unenforceable. I have other police chiefs telling me, their court magistrates tell them, do not bring us tickets because these laws are unenforceable. That's a concern. I don't want to waste your money and send officers to court for cases we know that they're going to lose. Another concern, Jake breaks are federally approved pieces of safety equipment in 50 states by the federal government. Does the town of Bolton have the right to tell motorists they cannot use an approved factory installed piece of equipment? A lawyer will have a field day the first time a truck crashes and the driver says, I didn't want to break the Bolton law and not use my brakes, and that's why I crashed. I know there's a provision in there that says in an emergency, but how do we, as the police, prove the emergency? As you saw, nobody even knew that our town trucks, except for myself and the DPW director, had jig brakes. That's why initially I was opposed to this. Because we can't tell our heavily laden sanders that they can't use their safety equipment when they need to use it. So I have concerns about this, big picture concerns, not just eliminating the noise, but I have to look out for the town of Bolton and all of you as far as liability. We have better things to spend our money on than court and lawyers. That's why I suggested, let's try first. Oh, sorry, you need to make a living.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, this fear that we're always going to get sued. We have the Tort Claims Act, we have insurance. I think it's pretty remote that the town has exposure on that, but my question for you, though, is if the Attorney General is approving this bylaw, why do you say it's sort of per se unenforceable? If it's been approved by 10 other towns, the Attorney General has signed off on this bylaw.
Every other police department, every other town that I've spoken to, they do not enforce the rules because there's no teeth to it. There's no court aspect of it. And the proving factor, there is quite a large burden of proof on the police. For speeding, if we catch you on radar speeding, that has to be a certified officer on a certified piece of equipment that has current recertification and training, and the conditions have to be correct. For
for us to prove that on a piece of sound equipment, there is a significant cost involved in that.
Sure, but if we incur that cost, it then becomes enforceable.
If the courts choose to enforce it. And everything I've heard and been told is that the courts are not enforcing it. So basically you have a sign with the threat of a fine, but no teeth. That's why I suggested before, let's try the sign first and ask them if they'll stop using these things or limit using these things as opposed to stop using them. And let's see what happens. It's short money. It's a few $100s for some signs. Before we get involved in you having to add thousands of dollars to my budget for us to enforce something that we're not confident in enforcing.
It seems as though the issue here, though, I mean, either the selectmen sponsor this, or we decline to sponsor it, and 10 citizens, sign a petition and put it on as a citizen's petition. So I mean, that seems to be the choice. I think there are probably 10 people who are hearing this and perceive it as a problem. So I mean, that's the question. And interestingly enough, I just read that since 1715, it's been 10 citizens who can put something on a town warrant. So that law hasn't changed since the General Court passed that 300 years ago. That's been the threshold for an article at town meeting. So,
Okay, I just want you all, obviously if it goes on the ballot, that's great, that's the way things should work, but you should know up front that we do have concerns with it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the chief of police. I think that we should try the please, no jake breaks first. This is a big issue for those of us who hear it all the time. And I think we could appeal to their better nature. They know how far they have to go before they come to a full stop at the stop sign in front of my house. Have the sign, see if it makes any difference. I don't mind going out there and charting plates, companies, whatever I can do to help with it. I don't think that we need the bylaw right now. Thank you.
Do you want to vote on this now, or do you want to just continue to think about it?
Well, I think, it sounds like there's some updated wording that we haven't had a chance to look at anyway, so I suggest that we continue this to the next.
I can do a couple of things. We can certainly get the updated wording to you. I'm going to be getting the first draft of the warrant to town council Monday, Tuesday. I'll include the new wording in the draft of the warrant, just so, if we do go forward with it, then it will already have been bid. And then I would ask you at the meeting
So
on
I
the
say we
26th
just pretend like we're still
whether or not,
recording.
it's going to be, that the board will sponsor it on the warrant. And then if
I'm
you
at
don't,
the
then
3.
there's still an entire month for a proponent to gather 10 signatures to put it on as a citizen's petition.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. The next item on our agenda is the pipeline open house update. If folks don't know, the Tennessee Gas Pipeline Kinder Morgan open house that was, I guess, had done snowed out at some point, has been rescheduled for February 25th at 6 p.m. at the Berlin Elementary School. And that's I gather the way these open houses work, they've got 30 Kinder Morgan people there to talk to people and answer their questions. But I know that a lot of folks have concerns and are planning on going. I think I'm going to go. A question I have is I want to know what alternative routes they've they've considered. So, the next item on our agenda is a Code Red update. And I just signed up for Code Red. You got my app. I have my Code Red app here too. Yes, I do. But Don, could you just sort of explain where we stand on that?
Certainly. Code Red is really, it's a tool that we purchased a few months ago that we've gotten training on, and we've got hopefully all the kinks worked out of it. But you can go to the town website and register. Many people are already, we had a database with a lot of people in it with their phone numbers that came with this. But you can get on and register, maybe add a cell phone number if we didn't have it. You can also, you can choose to receive a text or an email. And basically what it does is in an emergency, as we don't intend to overuse it, in an emergency we can get a message out quickly to everybody who's in that database. It's effectively, it's like a reverse 911. And fortunately, we did not need to use it in the huge snowstorms that we've had, but if something came up during the snowstorm, we could have gotten emergency messages out to people. So I was very relieved that we had it up and running before the first snowstorm came. So, I mean, you can go to the town website. You can also opt out. You can go to the town website if you've received a message, you don't want to receive them for some reason, you're free to go in and remove yourself. And again, there are some towns that use it, I believe, overuse it. And I think people become desensitized to it. So that's not something that we're going to do. But if there's a chemical spill on Route 495, and we want to get people, we want to get a message out to people, we can use it for that. If there's a missing child, we can get our own sort of, Amber Alert out to our residents to look for things. So those are the type of things that we'll use it for. I'm delighted that I have the discretionary funds remaining in my budget to be able to acquire it, because this is not something that was budgeted anywhere. It was something that I learned a little bit more about, and I said, boy, let's be proactive and get our hands on something like this, since we lost our ability to access 911 capability, reverse 911 capability. So I think it's a great tool. I hope we never have to use it, but someday we'll have to. And people can go to the website to register. Yes, they can. You can see it on the home. You can see the link from